So, welcome to our second episode of Sex in the News. I'm Dr. Jennifer Weeks, and I am here with
Eli Irving.
And today we're going to talk about a series of articles from the New York Times, and it actually started in February. We're recording this in December, so this has been basically almost a year-long series of articles that the New York Times has published, starting in February with an article called A Marketplace of Girl Influencers Managed by Moms and Stalked by Men. And we're going to talk about these, which really looked at that whole trend of moms marketing their children online. The second article came out in September, entitled Instagram Facing Pressure Over Child Safety Online, unveiling their sweeping changes, which talked about some of the new online safety changes that Meta made for Instagram in September. And the final one, which is for us kind of super interesting, came out, I'm trying to pull it up, in December. And this really specifically looked at, or was the story about a girl who was a youth influencer, I guess that's what you would call it. And this came out in November. The title of that article, she was a child Instagram influencer. Her fans were grown men. And so it's kind of been this ongoing portrayal or discussion of what is actually going on online with Instagram, with these young person accounts. So just kind of as a recap, the investigation started. They were looking at accounts that were run by, they called them mom run accounts. They said there were a couple that were, kind of dads, but it was mostly these accounts run by mothers, because there's an age limit, or a minimum age to be on Instagram, right? You're not supposed to be 11 on Instagram. So these parents were running accounts of their children, right? So these are young girls starting at 6, going on up until I think 13 is you're supposed to be, to minimum age, and looking at their followers. So they were like girls who were in dance or in sports or all of these things. And these accounts were kind of them posting images of their young children, bathing suit images, dance clothes images. And it really kind of talked about how these accounts were being run, right, to get clicks, to get money, to get sponsorships, to get free stuff. And then really looking at who's following, right? Like who's actually following these young girl accounts. And many, many, many of them were men who are interested in children. And by interested, we don't mean like, oh, that's a cute kid, or that's a cute outfit, I'm going to get that for my daughter in her dance class. We're meaning men who are sexually interested in children. And so they really looked at who these guys were and who was following them, and the kind of the comments they were making. And my pet peeve, Eli knows this, not everybody knows this, but my pet peeve is about terms, right? And so they talk about pedophiles, right? And these pedophiles are on there. And this is, you're going to get my
semantics.
This is my semantics, and this is my soapbox. So the first lesson for today, right? Because the goal of Sex in the News is to learn something about what's going on. Pedophilia is sexual interest in prepubescent children, and only prepubescent children. Hebephilia is the sexual interest in pubescent children. And that's, again, these are kids who are not fully developed, but are starting the process of puberty. And so my semantics, my soapbox, is that probably the majority of these folks are not necessarily pedophiles, though they might be, but this is definitely pedophilia, right? Or hebephilia. If you're having sexual interest or sexual attraction to these 11, 12, 13-year-old kids, we're probably in the hebephilia zone. So that's my soapbox. You will hear that again. Pedophilia is prepubescent children. Eli's heard me talk about this about 72 million times.
No, it makes sense though, because the thing is that like a lot of people just use pedophilia or pedophiles because of the zing that it has, and everything that everyone has watched Law and Order SVU, so they use that all the time. So then anyone who does anything with a minor is going to be called a pedophile.
Yeah, hebephile. I mean, most people don't even know what that is, and it doesn't really have the zing, and it's not going to capture the media attention like pedophile.
And most people will reject the term hebephile anyway, because they're just like, oh no, who cares? It's semantics. We don't care about semantics. Like until you feel as though semantics are necessary.
Right. And in our line of work, semantics are necessary, right? We work with people who have these sexual interests, and we actually need to know what their sexual interest is, right? What age group we're working with. But so that's my soapbox. Thank you, Eli. And there's a million things to talk about in here, but I kind of wanted to talk about something that I know Eli has a lot of experience with. And so as these investigators were looking at these accounts, they were kind of following or looking through the accounts of the men who were following these young girls and making comments. They said that they had reported over 50 questionable images, right, through the app, reported them to Instagram.
To Instagram.
And they got one response out of those 50. And I want to kind of ask Eli about this because I know that's something he's done, and just to talk about his experience with reporting questionable material.
So, I mean, in general, like I'm pretty sure a lot of people, well, I don't even know, I don't really want to claim a lot of people have done this, but as far as reporting images on Instagram or videos on Instagram and Facebook, since they're all Meta, right? The process of it is very annoying because you have so many different things that you could claim this picture is, but obviously if you think that it's sexually suggestive or you think that it's a little lewd and you think this is problematic, you will want a place where you can report it. So once you report the image or the video, it'll then say, okay, why are you reporting this video? And it can be like a scam, they give you all these different options, but then it's just like, okay,
false information, like that,
and then there's just like nudity, sexual activity, sexual exploitation. Is this person a minor do you think this person is a minor in the video? So I mean, there are options that you can pick, but the problem is that there's always going to be a queue of all these, of millions probably, of images and videos that have been reported. Now, the waiting process is kind of weird. Sometimes they'll say a week or so, give or take, like once you look up the time frame of which images or videos would actually get reported and
so
things
that's like that. What they're saying is going to be their investigation period. When you report it, they say they need like a week to check out the content.
Yeah, because I mean, sometimes it could take up to weeks in order to do that. And I know that I would say with my experience, Facebook takes the longest. Instagram is a little bit more prompt in getting those reported images and or videos dealt with, or at least getting a response back. Because I think the longest that I've waited for a response back from Instagram would probably, before I got an answer, will probably be like a good week.
Okay. What would you say your experience is in terms of like, are they just ignoring things that could be questionable? Do you feel like they're taking them seriously, so to speak?
I don't think that they are taking certain things seriously because, now, to be fair, my view of things because of what we do may be completely different compared to a moderator who's been looking at things all day and probably has actually seen the worst of the worst. And whereas like the videos that or a photo that I'm reporting is just like a cupcake compared to what the images
really maybe or the videos they're watching. Yeah.
Right. So they could probably say that this content was removed, restricted, or not removed at all, or the profile has not been removed either. So it's all really just up to the judgment of Instagram. However, I don't know how many times that specific image, video, or profile has been reported, but I do think that because like the kids nowadays are just called scamming it, right? Spamming the profile. So if I do believe I read somewhere where if they have X amount of repeated reports on an image, video, or profile, they'll probably knock it out.
They'll flag that.
They'll flag it, and then they'll probably do something more promptly to do something about that.
Yeah. So I know that, and I mean, we can talk about this probably with every article we talk about, but because of the work we do, we're probably a little more sensitive, right? Like we'll see stuff and be like, oh, maybe that's not appropriate for social media, or even like if our friends, like for me, like if my friends post pictures of their kids, totally innocuous, nothing like absolutely nothing suggestive, just like a picture of their cute little kid. My brain is always like, oh, should you post that? Is your account private? Please make it private.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're probably hitting things. And I think particularly, for you, like with the animated stuff, right?
Right.
The things that are, the anime, the very sexually suggestive, potentially minors drawn, which is technically illegal, right? Because the pornography statutes say it doesn't have to be a live person. It can be a drawn image of child, child sexual abuse or children engaging in sexual activity. But
right. And to go off of that too, it's just like, because me being a 90s baby and growing up with anime, as a kid, you don't necessarily think about it that way. And then even I would say all my 20s, I didn't really think about it that way. But until I got this job, started working with this population, I started looking at stuff and I'm just like, oh.
Right.
And it's just like, okay, this is not it. Like but anime continues to circle around people in the teenage years, people in high school. So, and then the themes are sexualized.
Right. Absolutely. So And I don't know, where that gets on the priority list. Like if you're reporting those things on social media, they're probably, I would imagine, I have zero clue, but that would be kind of down the list of like, okay, that's you're reporting live images, but also animated stuff. They're probably bumping the animated stuff down and looking at live, children, not drawn children.
Right. That's probably, yeah. Because I mean, like, I haven't reported anything. Like, I've reported more stuff with the animated things where I was just like, this is a little, because I don't really see much with the live stuff,
inappropriate
unless
things.
it's just like, yeah, unless it's just an adult or something like that. Something I just don't want to see on my feed.
No, and again, algorithms, we're not watching that stuff. We're not commenting on that stuff, so we're not going
Right.
to get that. Right. And that was actually a lot of what this article talked about, was that it's this strange world. I am not an influencer. I am not of that generation. I'm too old for that. But how these parent-led accounts, they knew what was going on in the comments, right? That the people were commenting on their children's images or videos, sexual things, overtly sexual things, sometimes subtle sexual things,
Overtly sexual.
but frequently overtly sexual things about, your 7-year-old in the bikini shot that you put up on their account, right? And how some of the parents were like, well, yeah, you kind of get that stuff, but if you block them or you delete them, those comments or those followers, then you don't have the following, and you don't have, the clout to get the sponsors for the for products and the money and things like that. And
Right.
that just boggles my mind, right? At some level, that the parents are like, well, yeah, we know that people are following our children and are sexual, and not all parents, right? Some of the parents in
Right.
here were horrified. They were deleting the people, reporting them, things like that. But some of them were just kind of like, well, yeah, that's what happens. And then several years ago, Instagram made subscriptions available.
Right.
And a lot of these parent run accounts have subscriptions for their minor children where
Right.
you can pay, right, to have images or videos, or what one of them was like, special content, right? Like a live Ask Me Anything with like your 10-year-old daughter, and using, they're getting clothing discounts, gifts from Amazon, followers going on buying things from their wish list, Cash App. We're selling these subscriptions. Feels like it's literally at some level grooming the kids to just be like, your next step is OnlyFans, right?
Yeah,
Because we're literally paying for all of this content.
I think it's kind of similar to how Ivy League colleges have like feeder schools. This is the same thing with the social media space. I think that it's just like you start, creating somewhat of like your own content, your own portfolio, right, on Instagram, and then next thing you know, he's trying to, with the innocent idea of just trying to catch a modeling gig or get sponsorships with your favorite brands that you like to wear.
Right.
But then it just you get these nefarious people trying to just sexualize the child and make it just an OnlyFans account.
Right. It's basically, it's not sexual, right? Or
Right.
it's not naked. It's not
Right. The content is not that.
masturbating videos or whatever, because that would be illegal. But it's like,
Right.
it's so close to that line, right? And there was one person that they talked about that, and because they're getting requests, right, in these special subscriptions, like requests for
Right.
parents to make child, CSAMs, child pornography images, and to make this content. And if they don't, like one guy called the school and told the school about the kids' pictures, and the school called the kid into the principal's office and grilled her. So it's crazy to me that sort of this is going on and parents are running the accounts. You look like you had a comment.
And I think I lost it.
That's okay.
Yeah, because it's just that, it's really about the guys that are coming on these accounts and then just making it a sexual thing.
Right.
Because they're the ones that are honestly just sexualizing the child, right? Because they're the ones that are making inappropriate comments.
Yeah, I mean, the parents, and I'm not trying to dog the parents, right? Like, I think the majority of these parents are making these accounts innocently, so to speak, right? Like, and most folks are ignorant of all of the things that goes on in the internet, which you and I are not. But it very quickly, if you're running one of these accounts, you very quickly become aware, based on the comments, based on your followers,
Right.
based on the DMs of what's going on.
Yeah, because I mean, you don't know, right? You don't know who's following these accounts, because the thing is, it could be a dad who has a
Right.
daughter, or a dad who is managing her daughter's account that loves that kid, that a bunch of pedophiles are actually spamming
Right.
that account. But it's just very difficult because just like, okay, once these guys start making comments, you got to knock those, you got to moderate, because the same thing with chats, like you have moderators in chats. So I think that people, especially parents, need to be a little more diligent and hyper vigilant about what's going on on these profiles.
And just to kind of to bump on that these articles really talked about the parent-led accounts or the parent-run accounts. Same darn thing is happening to the teenagers' accounts, right? That
absolutely,
they're getting these comments, there's getting these DMs, guys are sending dick pic, like there's just all of this stuff happening. These particular articles were really about these parent-led accounts, but if your kid is on Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram, they are getting this they're getting these messages. It just happens all the time. I don't work with adolescents, Eli does, but it's just common. It's not even like a shocking thing anymore.
Yeah, because the kids, they do that with other kids. It's just such unfortunately, it's commonplace where they are doing that with each other. So it's just that they're, when they get a guy or a grown ass man doing something like that, they're just like, oh, this is uncomfortable, but not a big deal. Like kind of like they're so desensitized from it.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was an article, a research article came out a couple of years ago. I think it was out of Canada, looking at high school age girls, right? And how often they were getting, these images sent to them, like the dick pics sent or the, pornography sent to them, not by their friends, right? But again, by grown ass men. And to the point where one of the girls had said, like, when they graduated, oh, like, we should make an album of the pictures as a joke, right? Like, it literally happened so often. It was kind of a joke. They were so desensitized to it. And it's, like, again, we do this work and it's like, these are men, these are adults who are, sending these images to 14, 15, 16-year-old kids. This is, this is not legal, right? This is super inappropriate, but they're so desensitized to it that they're just like, yeah, that happened. And we're just like, no, not okay.
Yeah, this is just like, this is you need to be a little bit more serious about this. You can't just brush this off as just like, oh yeah, this is just, this is not a crush that keeps sending you text messages. Like, this is not. It's not that.
And so another one of the things that I thought we could talk about that came up was, one of the mothers they had interviewed, I think, was in that sort of ignorant category. And I don't mean that rudely. I mean that literally just uninformed, that she had started one of these accounts for her daughter, again, innocently, not thinking about it, and sort of had her eyes opened, unfortunately, because what was going on. And she was just like, I had no idea what grooming was, right? Like, she didn't know what it was. And thank God for her, like, good for her. She didn't have that experience, I'm assuming, when she grew up, which is great. But she, like, it just didn't connect that these men offering to, sending, what do they do? Like Roblox cash for video games and all of this stuff. Like, that's grooming, right? That creating friendships, adults creating these friendships with minors and sexualizing those friendships and offering gifts. Like, this is grooming. And just to have no awareness of that. So that's sort of another thing. Like, yeah, that's grooming. What is grooming, right? It's creating these relationships. It's creating a friendship that we then sexualize, and it's often about gifts and things like that. And it happens in person. It happens online all the time.
Yeah, it's just a transactional friendship in a sense where it's just like, okay, I give you this, you give me that.
And that word transactional, like that, sort of from a bigger picture, and if you want to talk about, like, that's just what hit me with this, is that the relationships, like, everything is transactional. To kind of jump ahead to the third article a little bit, was an interview and kind of following the life of a girl who was a minor influencer. Nothing, not sexual, but her and her dad ran an Instagram account and had accounts on other sites. When she was young, she was a sports kid, like a surfer, and so there was definitely bikini shots of this little kid. And then as she got older, and one of the things she said, and you said transactional, so it just hit my brain. So there's two types of men online: those that were useful to her and those that she needed to destroy.
Right.
How do you process that comment? Because I'm stuck on that for a little bit.
So as a guy, right, I think that men, from a historical perspective, and I'm not trying to quote unquote simp here, but because the reality is that men started this shit, right? So we as men, we have exploited women, abused women, girls too, right? And have kind of molded women in a sense where they just were supposed to be subservient and just be our objects of pleasure and use, abuse, and discard, right? Essentially, women, until one day, women were just like, okay, if you want to do that, pay me.
Mhm.
Right? Because I think that that's one of the, even when it comes to protests from a civil rights perspective, right? If you want someone to hear your message from a business perspective or a corporation perspective, it's hit them in the pockets.
Right.
So women did the same thing.
And for
still
some
are
people,
doing
I'm
the same
going to interrupt you real quick and then you can keep rolling. But, and some people would say like, oh, well, that's, because they were abused and all these things. And they just feel that their only worth is in their body. And that is true for some women. But for some women, that pay me piece is empowering, right? And it's about
Right.
taking their power back.
Absolutely. And and you can't, I feel as though you can't blame them. Like, it's just like, this is from a historical perspective, we like, who made the bed, we gotta lay in it, right? Metaphorically speaking. But it's just that, and as generations and generations of girls and women, right, they're just like, okay, well, now we're in this space where women are making money online by doing whatever, by either sending pictures or sending videos to these dudes or to these men that want something very specific.
The bespoke pornography.
Bespoke pornography, yeah, whatever it is, right? But if they want that kind of content, they're gonna have to pay for it. And so when you get these women that are making all this money about it, and they're setting the rules and boundaries of it, and what they're gonna do and what they're not gonna do, it's like they're in power in a sense. Like they literally took their power back. So when you have a now woman saying, there were men that were useful for me, which is very ominous, but we could figure out at least like to some depth of what she means by useful, right? As far as getting financial gains from it.
Financial gain and things like that. Yeah.
Right. But then when it comes to destroy, to me, that means there are men that are constantly crossing her boundaries and or other girls or women's boundaries that needed to be dealt with.
Absolutely. And that's just her name.
Judy something, right?
Jackie Jeho is
Jackie.
Yeah. So she's a Dutch young woman. She's now over, she's now 18, but she did, kind of take power over that. And she has her own kind of content that she's on OnlyFans now and on Playboy as an adult, but she's had her own kind of sites off and on that she's curated, and said that, she was very active kind of in hunting down the people who were making comments about when she was a child, right? When she was still a minor and not posting sexual content. And I think she said at some point, like, she literally like hunted them down and called somebody's wife and was like, do you know what your husband's doing? And I think so that's sort of that piece of destroy, but it's just that transactional thing, right? That this is just about money and transactional. And I think that's because we look at things from like a child safety perspective and a victim perspective, and, kind of hopefully how to make the world a little bit of a better place. Right. And it's hard to combat that, I think, right? Or to get that education out there when there is absolutely an allure of, by the time I'm 18 years old, I have made $800,000, right?
Right.
As a subscription account as a minor, right? There's an allure to that, and it makes, I don't know, I think it makes sex and sexuality transactional much more than I would like it to be. And like, if that's your thing and you're an adult, right? We always say safe, sane, consensual, that's your thing. But then I think that transactional culture, which I think culturally a lot of even our relationships feel transactional to me, and that you lose that depth of intimacy and actually the ability to have a deeper relationship, which some people really want.
Absolutely. And it's just that, if you think about it, right, if you're starting out with Judy, right, if you're starting out getting subscriptions, making money off of these interactions that you're having with people, I mean, I'm not saying that all people do this, but where you could separate.
This is a subset, right?
Subset, right? You can separate, you making money off of these relationships that you have and actually having an intimate relationship with someone who you deeply care about. But it's just that it does set a precedent of just like, okay, if this is the first kinds of relationships that you have before you even start having, before you know what intimacy even is, right? You're going to get some form of intimacy through what people are going to be asking of you.
It's right? Commoditizes sex in a way. Yeah.
Right. And it commodifies intimacy, right? If someone's asking for an intimate photo or video of you, that's going to be your initial experience, and then it could potentially transgress into being in a romantic relationship, but therefore there's transactional epithets with it.
Yeah. It's so, again, this is where I feel my gray hair and I feel old and I'm like, oh my God, right? Like the things that culturally now are acceptable and about sex and sexuality are so very different. And you and I had that conversation on chat the other day. We're like, am I turning into a prude?
Right.
And it's not about
Right.
that, but it's just about sort of seeing things from a different set of eyes. And again, that's not even like my age or whatever, but it's what we do, right? And how what we do really colors how we see these things.
Yeah, and it's just that we don't see, especially when there's children involved, we're not necessarily seeing how innocent things are anymore. They just aren't, and I just think that it's because of the work that we do, and we now, like, it's the world of porn and sex addiction. Like, it's just like,
once you know, you cannot
once you know, you
unknow,
can't
right?
unknow. So it's just like, it's kind of hard to kind of watch the news and things like that. And like, even with the new documentary with the girl JonBenét, yeah, like, there was a part in there in that documentary where they were saying that the parents were sexualizing her because of the pageants that she was in.
Right, the outfits and the dance
Outfits and
routines
dance routines and stuff. I mean, there was one excerpt where some woman who was vaguely labeled as an expert said that JonBenét was during one of her performances, she was masturbating with the saxophone, and I was like, is this for real? Someone really said that this was her masturbating with the saxophone? No, she was doing was just going like this with the saxophone. It's just like, what? But this also speaks to the ignorance, naivete,
maybe is a better word. Yeah.
of people when it comes to sex.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's I don't know, it's again, like, we live in such a black and white world where everything is actually gray, and sex and sexuality is so gray that it's like, either, do whatever you want, or like, oh my God, everything becomes sexual, and everything isn't sexual, right? Now,
Right, absolutely.
is that whole pageant thing kind of crazy as to how they dress
my
up?
opinion.
Absolutely. But was she masturbating with a saxophone? Probably not. Yeah. So I think this is, for me, what brought this about was that why I wanted to talk about this is, it is interesting, obviously. Like, we know that there's men all over social media that are commenting and stalking and DMing and sending inappropriate things to young people on social media. We know that. So I think for us, like, to see these articles come out was not actually a big surprise. We see this all the time. But to kind of get that information out there, but I want to give you the floor for a little bit, Eli, just kind of talk about, because you are the one who, in our practice, who works with the young people. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but, to talk about, if you want to, kind of what that role of social media is, and how that kind of gets wrapped around the sexualization or the sexuality of these kids that you work with, or how that can be problematic for them, whatever you might want to talk about with that, since you're our guy when it comes to the adolescents and the practice.
So a lot of the times when it comes to the kids, they are obviously trying to find out who they are as individuals, right? Trying to find out who their friends are still, and or they may not feel as though they are seen in the physical space, right? So social media gives them an avenue to be seen by completely other people, just different people, other people. So when they formulate these friendships with people online, not only can they be whoever they want, but they're talking to someone who could or could not be who they say they are.
Being whoever they want, right?
Essentially everyone's being whoever they want. And then when you have some random dude or some random woman asking for pictures and videos and stuff who we've been talking to for a little bit, you claim that you know them, you feel, quote unquote, feel like you know them.
Right.
And then next thing you know, you're sending these images to some random person that you don't know who they really are.
It's that false sense of intimacy, right? Like, oh, well, we've been chatting, we messaging, I know them. Like, you have no idea who this person is.
No idea who you're talking to. You never met them. So how can you say you know them?
Right.
I mean, they do. I mean, we've all been young, right? And we've all, had crushes on so-and-so, and we, quote unquote, that feeling of like, yeah, they get me. I know them.
It's fantastic feeling to have someone be interested in you, right?
That dopamine hit.
It's flattering. It's wonderful. It's dopamine, right?
Yeah, and it's just like these teenagers, I mean, they're just looking for genuine connection, and sometimes it's hard to really guide them, and I think that's the word that they essentially need, is guidance when it comes to interacting with people online, because they feel like it's an amazing feeling, that dopamine rush, when you're sitting there playing a game with 3-4 other people that are into the same stuff that you're into. It feels like you together, you guys can take take on the world, right?
Yeah.
Or take on that world in the video game. And then when things start getting weird, or like just people start requesting things that's just out of the ordinary, just like, okay, what if I say no? Are they gonna like me? If I reject this, are they still gonna be willing to be my friend?
Right.
So it's just like there's all those things, that all these experiences that they have not experienced, where it's just like, yeah, you can have boundaries, and if your friend doesn't respect those boundaries, then he's not really your friend.
Right. And this, I mean, there's such a vulnerability at that age, right? Like,
Right.
so to be wanted, to be desired, kids just want to belong, right? They want
Right.
to feel connected, which makes it prime for the grooming, right? Because that feels so good, and that connection. And I think that's where, the folks do get into that, who are blackmailing adults even too, right? This is not just adolescents, right? Like we hear in the news all the time about adults sending images to somebody and getting blackmailed, I'll send it to your boss or whatever.
Yeah, remember my client that had that issue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've had a couple of those folks that, got
Yeah.
folks, and they've been male clients for us, but who have, for whatever reason, gotten into these relationships with people, sent them money, sent them pictures
Yeah.
of themselves, and some of them include their face, which is never a good idea. And then get exploited or blackmailed for large
Blackmailed.
sums of money.
Yep,
And
I
it's the
remember.
kids are even, I mean, if the adults are falling prey to this, the kids are even more vulnerable.
Absolutely. And all of this is under the guise of wanting to belong, having a connection with someone, and then someone exploits that relationship that they built over time.
Yeah.
And it's very, very unfortunate, because then they have that trauma of like, okay, now that this has happened to me, how do I know that whoever I'm in touch with, even in the physical space, in reality, or through the screen, is going, how do I know that they're not going to do this to me?
Is not going to betray me like that, or betray
Right.
my trust. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this also comes in, for me, this is about parents, right? So these articles were about parents who are running these accounts, which, okay, maybe they get caught up in the likes and the social media and the money, right?
Yeah.
But even for the young people, like, parents need to know what their kids are doing online, right? We've always talked about this. I wrote a book about this a long time ago, before it became a popular thing to talk
Yeah.
about. Like, the parents need to know what their kids are looking at, right? They need to be in those accounts. They need to see who's messaging them. And again, not in like a necessarily, particularly for the older kids, right? Like, you don't need to be in their phone all the time, but
Right.
there needs to at least be that transparency, or a relationship with your child, that they feel comfortable to come to you and be like, hey, mom, dad, this person sent me this. What do I do?
Right. And it's just that, because I'm pretty sure there are parents out there, and the kid comes to the parent and it's just like, hey, this person sent me this, or this person said this to me. What do I do? They're probably just like, oh, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what to do. Like, just ignore it.
It's not in the parent playbook, right?
Yeah, it's just like, and there's no blueprint, because, as technology changes very fast, right?
Absolutely.
We're not that fast at changing and
No.
adapting to certain things, right? So I do think that at the bare minimum, these parents need to know about what's going on in the social media space and the internet space. But I feel like parents are just they walk around on eggshells, even if they know about it, because they don't want to talk about it. And then their kid then knows about it. And then they're just like, okay, if this is something that's upsetting to my parents, how can I get around that to still experience it, to see what it's really about, and not have them upset about it?
Right. Like, it's
So
so
it's so hard to navigate, because it's just like, you don't want to talk to a kid to tell them about, to teach, quote unquote, teach them, or have them know about something, by exposing them to it and getting
Right.
them to want to kind of do it. Because I think that's the major issue when it comes to why parents don't want to talk about sex
Well,
or
and I
shit in
think
porn.
parents don't want to talk about it because it's just uncomfortable, right? Like, we still don't
Right.
talk about sex and sexuality, and
No, we don't.
it's uncomfortable to talk to your kid about that. And yeah, like, what kid wants to talk to their parents about pornography? None.
None.
Equally, the parents don't want to do it, but you have to, right? Like, I remember, we get parents that'll call and be like, little Johnny's, I caught him looking at pornography, and I'm worried, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, how old is little Johnny? Like, little Johnny's 15. And we're like, that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that conversation was something, and I know people hate to hear this, like, that's a conversation for 8 or 9 or 10 at this point in our worlds, because the average age of exposure to online pornography, initial exposure, is that young. Yeah, nobody wants, like, that's a horribly uncomfortable conversation, and we as humans avoid those like the plague.
Yeah, and I honestly think it's because of the amount of access to pornography through cell phones, and I think that that's exactly why 8-year-olds are getting
Right.
exposed to it, because they're just doing whatever.
Everybody, this, right? Like everybody's carrying
Yeah.
something like that around, and there it is. So it's
And it's
easy.
kind of and it's kind of concerning to see 8-year-olds with a smartphone. You're just like, what are you doing with a smartphone? I can give you like
Like, is
smartphone
it
or something
filtered?
like
What
that.
is it? Yeah, we
Right.
have, well, because a lot of our clients are not allowed, right, to have phones with internet
Yeah.
access. But also, for younger folks, there's the kosher phones. It looks like a smartphone. You can text, you can call, you can even kind of get, if you need like a map, Google Maps or something, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have access to all those other things. But
Yeah, and I honestly think that, and it also too, it's also, and it may not, and also be just the fact that parents are just overwhelmed. It's just something else that they have to think about consciously, that they have to worry about.
and it's a big
So-
thing, right? It's
And
not
it's a
little
big
thing.
deal.
Yeah.
It's not a little, yeah, it's not a little feat, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like on top of just trying to work as hard as they do to put food on the table. Now you're telling me that I have to worry about my kid looking at porn on the internet
Or
and
having
talking
some
conversation.
60-year-old guy sending them
Yeah.
images on their Instagram account.
And it's just like, it's just like, this is something else that you have to worry about with your kid because your kid is not safe with the smartphone in his hand.
Mhm.
So that's something else that you have to worry about.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not something-
totally overwhelming.
Yeah, and I can imagine it being overwhelming for the parents. They've literally have told me about that because I would have to have conversations with the parents when my client.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as our resident sort of adolescent therapist, you spend actually a lot of time talking to the parents.
got like hours talking to them over the phone about some of this stuff, and they're just like, I don't know, like they're just like, yeah, I'm glad that their kid has someone to talk to about this stuff, but it's just like to be able to, like, I could feel like the sigh of relief that they personally don't have to have
Don't
this
have to do it.
conversation because it's just like, again, like you said, no kid wants to talk to their parents about porn.
Yeah, it's not comfortable for anybody.
Huh.
So
But
All right.
and really quick before we get
Please.
out of this, really quick. So I was at a Christmas party this weekend, and there was a guy that is a sex education teacher at a high school.
oh, cool.
And he was saying how he has to be very, very careful about how to talk about sex with kids. And he was just like, I think that they need to know more about. He was like, I know that they're looking at porn. He was like, and they need to talk about porn, but we can't talk to them about porn because it's just like by our laws, like if we're doing that, we're pretty much it could be looked at as encouraging them to look at porn.
And there are a few states that are incorporating kind of pornography
Literacy.
education, but it's so few.
Yeah, I could imagine it being very few. And I'm just like, if you can construct a curriculum that doesn't encourage porn use, then I think that, and it's just strictly just education and making sure that, to talk about the goods and the bads, the reality versus fantasies and all that stuff, right? That needs to be spoken about. But he also, the main point that he was bringing home is that he also can't talk to them about masturbation. And he was just like, we know that they're doing it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was like, I didn't know that either until I spoke to him. And I was just like, I feel like that was spoken about in sex ed, but I could be wrong.
I don't remember.
Could be kind of blurring some things. But yeah, he was just like, they can't even talk to the kids about masturbation. And
So
it's
they're,
just-
they're not getting, so this is someone who literally does this for a living saying they're
Right.
not getting what they need. We know from research they're not getting what they need. And also that there's many, many states in this country where there is no requirement to teach factual sex education.
yeah,
Which blows my mind.
Which is
You can
insane.
teach sex education that is medically inaccurate, factually inaccurate, and that's totally cool. But like, I think that's a whole other
Yeah.
set of things for us to talk about on another episode. But
yeah, but and it's just like this guy. He said he has like a question box, and there are kids that are putting in questions that are just like obviously about because this is why he's just like they're having sex.
of course they are.
So he's just like they are obviously having sex, and they're anonymously putting in these questions that I sometimes feel uncomfortable answering, but it's just that he'll answer these questions, and it's just like it's like what they want to know because they don't know, and would you rather them just constantly look at porn to figure out what the answers are, and even know that it's
Right.
completely
Probably not the best
it's a
for
source
education.
of sex education. So it's just like what can you do? Like these kids are left to their own devices, and it's just like it's what
Yeah.
it is.
It is. So they have people like Eli to talk to because their parents need to do more of it, but don't do enough. So
Right, but the thing that I was telling him about was just like the time that they get to me, it's already too late because they did something wrong.
Right. They're not coming to us for sex education. They're coming to us because something has happened.
Right. Even though, like, after the fact, after they did something wrong, then they get the sex education, then it's just like, okay, well, what would have happened if it would have prevented if the sex education would have prevented a victim? Like, it's just like, what?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I'm going to wrap us up because this was sort of a short and sweet, but like, let's just recap, right? So what are we talking about?
Parents
having parent-run accounts for their children where they're posting things that are not intended to be sexually suggestive, but for folks who have a sexual interest in children are free content, right? Free masturbatory content, and that a lot of times these folks are making comments or harassing or requesting inappropriate things. And so please, parents, if you have those accounts, be aware, block, report inappropriate content. But even for those, I think in general for us, kind of another big theme is just the education, right? Like, even if you're not a parent running an account for your child, your kids are on social media, whatever they're on, know what they're doing. Know that there's probably people who are contacting them. They have probably dealt with this and you're not talking about it. So it's about kind of understanding what grooming is and understanding and figuring out how to talk to your kids about these really uncomfortable things.
Now, a question for you. Do you think when it comes to parents that are trying to keep a pulse on what their kids are doing, but it crosses the line of invasion of privacy for their kid, is that a necessary evil?
So you're getting philosophical. So I will go to my crutch, which is data, right? So what a lot of the research says is that the autonomy to children on phones, social media, whatever, should be given gradually, right? So your young kids, if you are giving a phone to a 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, you should know everything that's on there, right? Like, that's where the apps that, like, you could put the apps on where everything that's going, or they'll flag the moderator, which would be the parent, if sexual content comes across, right? But then again, we're assuming you're also talking to your kids about these things as they get older, right? They normally, or they should get some more autonomy, right? And so as they're 13, 14, 15, as they're getting older, we don't maybe need to have those apps on there where we can watch everything, but we still have to have those conversations. And I think about it, and this is going to sound freaking horrible, but in a way, a lot of our guys who are on probation are allowed to have their phones without any monitoring.
Without monitoring, yeah.
But there's also a transparency, right? So that if your teen is on there, they've earned that right. They've earned that trust from you because they're wise consumers of social media. There still has to be that ability to be like, hey, who are you following, right? Like, what accounts are you looking at? Hey, let me check out your phone. Because, and that is a debate, right? The privacy versus the overparenting. But your little kids should never be on a phone without parental monitoring. And then as they get older and they earn the trust and they become more savvy and more aware, then we give them more autonomy.
Yeah.
Like, I get it, right? Like, there's parents that are like, I want to know everything that's going on. And there's parents that are kind of like, la, 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 la. And we need to find a way in between.
Yeah, because I think that a lot of the parents that want to know everything that's going on, I'm just like, well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble and be the bearer of bad news, but you're not.
Right.
You're not going to be saying.
No, because, look, if you put them on, there's always an app to get around it, or, you do something to restrict a child's, particularly as they get older, their access to stuff. They're going to go on YouTube and find a way around it in 5 minutes, right? So, but I think it's about having those conversations and talking to your kids and helping them become wise consumers, right, of online content. And for me, like, the biggest thing is having a good relationship with your child, so that if they come across something or somebody messages them, they can come to you. I think of my friend Jen, who she's like, to me, the most amazing parent, but has cultivated relationships with her children. I remember when her eldest was 12, so this is a number of years ago, had observed a friend, right, doing things, taking pictures on a bus. These are like 12, 13-year-old kids, and went to her mom, right? Because she had cultivated enough of a relationship with her mom that she went to my friend Jen and was like, hey, my friend is doing this. It's uncomfortable. It made me uncomfortable. I don't think it's okay. What should I do about it? Right. And that's the perfect world, right? That you've had enough connection with your kid. You've talked about these things. They know it's out there, that they can come to you and say, I saw this, or this happened and it made me really uncomfortable. How do I handle it?
Right. And it starts there, because if you're the parent who's just the neurotic parent who's just like, oh my god, nope, you're not seeing them ever again, nope, take away, and we have
to, it is that it's that, again, the gray, right? The balancing act of, particularly as they get older, like we have to give them opportunities to learn, which means opportunities to fail. And it's, so how do you give them those opportunities and still keep them safe? And that's the balance beam that you're always walking.
Yeah, and it's just like we just hope that our kids would tell us what's going on in their life, like because if you're the neurotic person or the helicopter mom who wants to know everything, then the kid will do their damnedest to not keep you in the loop on things, and then you'll be stuck in the dark.
And then something comes as a shock. And that's even, I mean, and I know that helicopter parents are doing that because, again, they're trying to protect their children and they want them safe, but it ends up, I think, with the same result as the oblivious parents who are like, whatever, they have no idea what's going on. Those kids are not necessarily hiding things. Their parents just are, whatever they are, versus the helicopter parents where those kids are hiding, right?
Yeah.
They're probably hiding. So it's all about talk. It's about talking. It's about being comfortable enough to talk about sex and sexuality yourself, right? Like, are you comfortable enough with your own sexuality, your own knowledge of sex education, and then being able to do that with your child?
Yeah, and I think that's really is where it starts and where it ends. Because
not farming out sex education to the school and hope to God that they do an accurate and decent job, because we know that doesn't always happen. And then you talking to this gentleman at the party, like, he's restricted.
He's even restricted. And it's just like, I can't talk to them about what they want, what they're coming to me to talk about.
Yeah, I can't do it even though I have the knowledge and I would like to.
Yeah, and it was such a funny conversation too, because how it all started was just like, he's like, "Oh, you're a sex and porn addiction therapist? Cool." He was like, I like porn. I really like porn." and then I'm just like, "Oh,
Merry
okay."
Christmas.
I'm like, all right, cool. He was just like, let me. He was like, "I think I'm saying too much," and I'm just like, "Dude, I talk about this all day, like every day." He's like, I don't. It's not gonna bother me as much as it's bothering you. So it's just like, if you want to stop. If you don't,
I'm not here to judge you. We're just having
a conversation. So then it got into that stuff. So I mean, but again, right? You get to a place where you can have those uncomfortable conversations in a non-judgmental, safe place. And I think that there's a time and a place for those conversations. We're not in it. I think that a lot of people see porn and sex as something that's so ubiquitous, which it is. So they see it everywhere. People are talking about it everywhere.
But they're not talking about it.
But at the same time, I'm like, no, but they're not really talking about it.
You're seeing it, you're joking about it, you're sending memes, but nobody's really talking about it.
No one's really talking about it, like really having a conversation about it. It's just, you're just glazing it. Like, it's just like Randy Savage. You just, the cream rises to the top and you just scraping like the top of it. And you're not really talking about the dirty shit, the impurities of it all.
Yep.
No one wants to talk about that.
I feel like we need to end today with the Randy Savage quote.
When the cream rises to the top.
Perfect. All right. So thank you for hanging out with me again, Eli. And hopefully we will do this again. It has, unfortunately, the news cycle in the past couple of weeks has left us with plenty to talk about. So we shall be back.
Yeah, we will, because I'm going to talk about the real estate guys.
All right. Real estate guys up next.
Real estate moguls.
All right. Thank you, Eli.
Yep.